Akash began to eat cereal with one hand while opening his post with the other. Joseph had heard him leaping blithely out of bed and heading off to work at 3 that morning, and gathered he'd spent the next 6 hours directing an army of employees, while wielding a vacuum cleaner himself. Every movement was effective. His clothes were ironed, black hair immaculate. He was on the short side. 5'6" he'd once told Joseph, but indefatigable. Daylight robbery, he complained. Look at this. Electricity companies take the piss, don't they? Best thing about being inside is never having to open a bill. So what did your probation fella say on the phone? Joseph shrugged. Warned me to stay away from their house. Wants me to go through the proper channels when it comes to seeing the children. I told him I am going through the proper channels. Painfully bloody slow channels. But I had to check they're okay in the meantime, which involved hanging around a kid's playground like a nonce. I wanted to catch a glimpse, that's all, just a glimpse. Joseph shook his head. I've waited so long and it was like a miracle. Theo I'd know anywhere with his hair sticking straight up like he's had a fright. Genius with a football. Well, I taught him to kick a ball before he could walk. He had a little guy with him, a little blondie. Had to be Ben. My boys, Akash. My boys. Your in-laws will be bricking it. They probably think you're planning to abduct the kids. Which might be true, thought Joseph, as he scanned the jobs column in a newspaper. Young Akash had a knack for getting straight to the nub of things. His acuity had taken him to the top of his profession, handling stolen cars, at the tender age of 21. He came from a family of high-flying doctors, and nobody had ever doubted that he would follow suit. At first he obliged, and was a star pupil at his grammar school, a prefect and cricketing legend. Then he fell out with his father, fell in with a new crowd and rebelled spectacularly. He had a few run-ins with the police, and his offending escalated until he was the mastermind of a team of car ringers. Then a tip-off landed him in Armley. What are they like? Akash asked now. Your in-laws? Zoe had them wrapped round her little finger. Can't blame them. I was wrapped around it too. Hannah's a scary intellectual, lectures in physics at the university. What she doesn't know about quantum theory isn't worth knowing. She never liked me. We got off on the wrong foot. Why? Nobody could be good enough for her daughter. But I must have been our worst nightmare. The butcher's son from Tyneside. I was young. I was nervous. I was way out of my depth. And I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. She got my hackles up. Akash raised an eyebrow. You were rude to her, weren't you, Scotty? Joseph looked embarrassed at the memory. It was all unspoken. She was polite on the surface. She asked me about myself, but in this pained sort of way. It brought out the worst in me. I acted a bit yobbish, talked big about a fight I'd been in. I still had a massive shiner of a black eye, so I must have looked like a lowlife. Akash smacked his palm across his forehead. Don't. Freddie did his best, though. Joseph smiled. He just directed some play in Leeds. It was a sellout. Hannah and Zoe were gloating over the reviews, but old Freddie didn't give a toss. He spent the afternoon digging away in his garden, covered in mud, waffling on about insects. Insects? Joseph chuckled into his coffee. He fixed me with his glittering eye, like the ancient bloody mariner, and spent 10 minutes going on about how a teaspoon of soil contains millions of organisms. That's true, exclaimed Akash delightedly. Teeming with them. Well, Joseph closed the paper. Unless I want to be a pole dancer.